Okay, everybody.
Exactly.
So we are going to get started. We'll ask our first presenters to come up. And Craig Rice, Chair of the Education Committee, is in Annapolis today, representing us on our Maryland budget priorities with education. So he's not going to be able to join us, but sends his regards. Thank you so much. I am really looking forward to today's discussion. For me, this has a lot of urgency. The whole process we went through the past year around Amazon was a tremendous learning experience, I think, for all of us. And the fact that Amazon is coming to the region is, yet another good reason for us to really focus on how we are strategizing around the tech economy and make sure that we have a plan in place to support companies in the county in their desire to locate here or to expand here, to help ensure that kids from all over Montgomery County, from no matter what neighborhood you live in, have a shot at those jobs. And there's just, a tech economy is going to be growing in the Washington region in the future. And that is something that we now know in a way that we didn't know before Amazon made its HQ2 decision. And that really brings a lot of opportunities for us, but we have to step up to the plate to move on them. So today we're going to hear, first we're going to have a briefing on what we're doing at the K to 12 level. We're going to hear from Scott Murphy from MCPS, and really appreciative that Matt Gandel has come. He's with the Education Strategy Group, and MCPS and the Education Strategy Group are working together on an initiative, and so we'll hear more about Matt's work generally, and as well as general thoughts. And then we'll have a panel discussion, and I see another person or two I'm going to ask to join that, but we have Ben Edson, Doug McLean, Ola Sage, Sanjay Rai, and Ellie Giles. So a combination of private sector and education and workforce development. I see Stu Adelstein is here. I'd like him to come up for that discussion as well. And we'll just, this is a discussion where I think everyone on this side of the dais here is passionate about these issues and has been working on it, thinking about it for years. And I think today is a good opportunity to just kind of take a moment to focus in here and see if there's some initiatives that we can put a spotlight on and think about building for the future. So appreciate that. If any council members would like to make some comments before we begin, that would be most welcome. Mr. Juanda.
Thank you, Councilmember Reamer. It's good to see everybody here. Matt, good to see you. Scott, good to see you. This is an issue that, as Councilmember Reamer mentioned, that a lot of us have been working on for a long time. How do you make sure our kids are on good career pathways, particularly in high demand fields? And I'm very happy because I got both my committee assignments I wanted thanks to Council President Navarro, and I'm on the Education Committee and the PHED Committee, so this is right where I'm supposed to be. But I also wanted to disclose, Matt and I worked with each other in the Obama Education Department, and I have done some work with him prior to getting elected with ESG on Montgomery County issues. No longer doing that, but just wanted to put that on the record and disclose that. And so we're in good hands. He's done some great work with the MCPS, and I'm excited to hear about the continued partnership. So welcome.
Some of the good work we'll hear about today is your good work.
Yeah.
Exactly. Ms. Council President Navarro, is that you or, sorry, Andrew? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. See, I like to serve among gentlemen here. No, I mean, this is very exciting. I think there's no secret that as we sort of turn the page on a leadership, chapter and starting a new, chapter in Montgomery County with new leadership, both at the executive level as well as county council level. I feel like we're now poised to really focus very specifically in leveraging all of the assets and also the groundwork that we've put out there with regards to not just workforce development, but also this notion of focusing in our IT areas, our bioscience, life science, et cetera. So we've laid out, I think, the groundwork via our master plans, via the creation of different organizations, our partnership with the school system, et cetera. Now we really do have to focus and leverage those assets. And so it's really timely for us to now really sit down and start really putting forth, I think, some specific blueprints and some specific targets. We, I think, have heard this time and time again, especially as we closed this campaign season. This was very much front and center, continues to be. And so I'm really excited and hopeful that we'll be able to not only with you as partners, but everybody else who's been working on this, just focus and really start pointing to some of the outcomes that I know we can achieve. So I do thank you also, Chair of the PHED Committee, and my colleagues for the attention that is being paid and will continue to be paid to this issue.
Thank you. I just echo my colleagues up here. I think this is a critically important topic that we're focused on, and looking at our education system, not as K through 12, but really early childhood through career education. And in Montgomery County, we don't have an unemployment challenge, but we do have a number of people who are looking for work and a huge number of jobs that are open without a direct connection between those two. And so to narrow that gap and to connect folks who are looking for work with the training to fill those jobs, and then also making sure that our young people are being educated, not just for the jobs of yesterday, but the jobs of today and particularly of tomorrow, I think is a really important focus that we need to have as an education system, as a county council, in our workforce development and our economic development and our education, all working together and coexisting. Councilmember Reamer brought up Amazon and this new infusion of private sector industry to our region outside of government and research, which is critical, and to be able to seize on that and have the pipeline of talent to be able to reach it. Montgomery County, 75% of our students go on to college, 25% don't, and figuring out how we ensure those folks are trained for jobs that don't require college or are ready to take jobs that require college and advanced degrees, but particularly in the tech field, and really become a leader there is important to ensure that our economy grows, but also ensure that we're attracting businesses to grow our economy, because we can't fund the early childhood and the other educational priorities we have and fund the critical services that we have unless we build a private sector economy to be able to support it. And I think we're poised here in the next 4, 8, 12, 20 years to really set the framework to grow our economy in a significant way. And so I look forward to the discussion and look forward to working together for this priority that I know we all share.
All right. So, Scott, Matt, do you have an agreed-upon order, or?
We do.
Great.
So good afternoon, thanks for having us. Again, Scott Murphy, I'm the Director of Secondary Curriculum and District-Wide Programs in the school system, and work with Dr. Navarro, our Chief Academic Officer, and I lead up all of our career readiness efforts in MCPS. We thought today would be a good way to frame our conversation by talking about sort of the bigger picture of career readiness efforts in MCPS and throughout our county before we zero in on the technology sector and IT in particular. So what I thought we would do is just spend a couple of minutes just sort of refreshing and reframing the conversation. Is the left click supposed to? Try right if that's not. So it's not clicking, but
Yep.
yeah, the IT sector.
I'll go run it up there.
No problem. MCPS shares the point of view that the economy is changing before our eyes. The notions of going to four-year college is changing before our eyes, and career options for our kids are changing before our eyes. So as MCPS thinks about the future and thinks about ensuring that we are preparing students not just for the college trajectory, but the true meaning of college and career, so that every single student walks across our stage prepared for every possible option. That includes post-secondary education and includes readiness for careers. We need to make sure that we're doing that. In 2017, we commissioned an external review to do a review of our programs, to make sure that we had knowledge, understanding, feedback that our programs were industry-driven, were aligned to those jobs of the future, were high quality and rigorous, were accessible to our students. So we began working with the Education Strategy Group since 2017, who conducted that review, and has been partners with us ever since. So what we'd like to do is have Matt kind of share with you a little bit about what they saw when they came into MCPS and studied us from the outside, not just in the IT talent pipeline, but sort of all things career readiness. And again, they've just been great partners with us over the past couple years, and we're launching some new work that Matt will also talk about before we conclude.
Thank you, Scott, and thanks for having me here today. I've got a lot of deep roots in Montgomery County, having grown up here and gone through the school system and still raising my family here. So this is close to home for me, though my firm does work all around the country on better connecting education and workforce, a lot of work on K-12 to post-secondary transitions and then ultimately to workforce transitions. So it's been exciting to dive in here in Montgomery County. And let me just start with the context. Andrew mentioned earlier that, you know, those who go to college, those who don't go to college. If you look at the economic data today, just since the last recession, there really is no good options for folks who don't have some post-secondary education or training. Just not happening. So 99% of all the jobs created since that recession required post-secondary education. So if you just have a high school diploma in this new economy, you're really going to lose out. But it's not all about four-year degrees either. So the big shift is that there are many jobs for which an associate's degree can pay more than a four-year degree in other fields, and even something less than an associate's degree can open the door to meaningful career opportunities and career pathways where you can continue to grow your income and move up in a company, even move vertically, go back to school. Over half the students who are in higher ed these days are not there full-time. They're there part-time because they need to earn money. So the whole picture has changed, I think, from when many of us grew up and went through schools. And it is about post-secondary readiness, but it's not all about four-year college readiness. And you really need to understand the careers and the fields and the trajectories and the credentials that open those doors. So a lot of the work we're doing around the country is focused on that. Here in Montgomery County, and I think elsewhere, what's really important, I think in the old days you thought of college readiness as one path, and then workforce or career readiness was another path, and unfortunately we know which students were often counseled to go down that second path, and they didn't have the same opportunities as the others did. Today you need to have both. You truly, as Scott said, need to have both strong academic preparation and exposure to career options and technical skills in order to be successful. And you need to continue that not only through high school, but all into and through college as well. So when we came here in Montgomery, did the Montgomery County review. Let's see where I'm pointing this. We started with what has Montgomery County Public Schools stood for many years, and I think all of us would recognize it's a very high-functioning, high-performing school system with a strong emphasis on preparing young people for college. And to Montgomery County MCPS's credit, that's been a big push, and it's been the case for all students, and there's been a lot of work done to kind of break down equity gaps within that mindset. What we focused on in our analysis is what can be done to build the technical and the academic prioritization in pathways for all students in Montgomery County. We took a hard look at the curricular programs that were in place. We looked at the participation in those pathways. We did surveys of students, of teachers, of parents, of employers to try to really understand how does this education prepare you for what's next, and how do employers feel about the readiness of NCPS graduates to enter their institutions, and even the ability to have a partnership with the school system to build those pathways. And we learned a lot. We presented that to the school board, I think it's September of 2017, and had a set of recommendations and findings. But right here, you'll just see at the high level what the findings were. High expectation school system, but pretty exclusively focused on four-year, and in a lot of cases elite four-year institutions as the only pathway. And as I said earlier, the world has changed in that regard. A lot of strong employers in Montgomery County, obviously, and many of them that would like stronger partnerships with the school system. Not a lot of the right conditions in place or mechanisms to build that partnership. In fact, we found multiple employer-facing organizations and initiatives that were drawing employers in different directions, and we thought there could be a more coordinated way to aggregate working with employers, not only in MCPS, but frankly across the higher ed institutions as well. There are strong programs in place in some of the high schools that really expose students to career pathways in fields like IT and healthcare. But there are also, first of all, those are inequitably distributed, so not all students have access to those programs. And there are also programs that probably need to be phased out because they lead to more kind of dead-end credentials these days that don't pay well, allow for upward mobility. We did a deeper look at the Edison School of Technology, which is an institution that was created years ago, as you're probably familiar, to really serve students with career interests. And we had a number of recommendations for how to transform that school into a more cutting-edge center that would combine career pathways and technical skills with academic skills, again, because it's no longer an either-or situation. And we also had recommendations for how to move from a part-time institution to a more full-time institution and perhaps have more equitable distribution of those opportunities across the county. We think there's a lot of room for improvement there, and we're continuing to work with MCPS on that. And then the last thing we looked at was how stakeholders, parents, teachers, and others view and understand these pathways and these opportunities. And we said there was an inadequate understanding of what Montgomery County Public Schools is doing to prepare young people for careers, what the options were, what the programs are, where they're accessible, and again, back to this notion that it's for all students, and this is a rigorous opportunity rather than kind of a place for students who may not be college material. To be quite honest, there's still a lot of that understanding from the past of how things were, and I think everyone agreed we need to move people to a future understanding of what the pathways and the doors that could open. I won't get too much more into the details of this because I want to talk about what's next, if I can get the slides to move. Scott, do you want to talk a little bit about what you guys are doing in response? Then what I want to spend a few minutes on is an emerging opportunity that Montgomery County is going to be participating in with other counties around the region in IT, because I think this will speak directly to the council's interest in that arena. So if you want to quickly speak to the report, I can go to that larger project.
Yeah, just real briefly, the way that MCPS is responding to this was presented to our board in 2017, but since that time have really begun some early work with urgency. Just a few examples up here. Some needed work to establish a new vision, that it's no longer a separate track, these two different paths, but it's really, crystallizing this vision of what it truly means to be prepared for post-secondary study, as well as the technical skills needed for good jobs. That's also some rebranding, is that there has been a stigma attached to career and technology education. And so part of our establishing a new vision is also rebranding the image of these high-quality, rigorous pathways that prepare for good jobs in the future. We're also working a lot on access, so that just because a program is not offered in your home school, making sure that there are ways for all students to access a program at a school down the street or at an Edison or other hubs, if you will, throughout the county. We're also really working to increase employer engagement through new structures in the school system, reimagining Thomas Edison High School in and of itself to make sure that it's aligned to this vision that we're talking about, as well as working with many of my colleagues in this room at Montgomery College and universities at Shady Grove on new pathways that are, again, aligned to the labor market. Another area of new work that we're really, really excited about is this regional partnership and the IT pathways in particular. So I'll let go back to Matt to cue that up a little bit more.
So this speaks to exactly what you were mentioning earlier.
He's clicking it from above. So.
Okay, I was going to say, I'm like clicking and it's
when
going.
you go, he clicks.
Okay, thank you. He's reading my mind. So this, as we were doing this work, there was a growing interest when you mentioned the Amazon, process that was playing out. As that process was playing out, there was a conversation going on in the capital region here, particularly driven by the employer community, about the need to view this area as a regional economy, not as a local county or jurisdictional economy. and particularly employers that are large enough to have kind of to span across the region, when they're looking at hiring, that's how they're thinking. They're looking at the talent coming from multiple school systems in multiple parts of the region, Maryland, DC, Virginia. And a lot of the work we've been doing at the national level on career readiness with states across the country has been funded by JP Chase Foundation, which happens to be the largest investor in workforce, the kind of philanthropic investment in workforce in the country. And they started taking an interest in the dialogue that was happening here, and they saw the work that was going on here in Montgomery County. And long story short, they chose to invest in a regional initiative to bring counties together across Maryland, DC, and Virginia to help align educational programs, better align educational programs with the regional economic needs that cut across the district, Northern Virginia and Maryland. It's just launched this month, so this is very timely that you're pulling this conversation together. There are 5 jurisdictions, if we can keep clicking through, that, there you go, they're at the bottom, that are participating. 3 in Maryland, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and Baltimore City, and then Northern Virginia, as well as DC itself. And there are 3, this is a 4-year initiative that JP Chase is funding, and they're in discussions with additional corporate philanthropies about potentially expanding this initiative. But the idea here is there will be a regional employer signaling system invested in that a group called the Greater Washington Partnership is going to develop, that will take labor market information from across the entire region about job availability, employer demands, the skills, knowledge, credentials that are needed to fill the jobs that are available and that they think will be available in the future. And that will be collected on a more regular basis and organized in a manner that can be shared with all the county school systems and in the participating counties to help make better decisions about the programs that get expanded or built, and frankly, those that get phased out or evolved. So that will be new, and the idea is that the information is collected from across the entire region and presented back to all the county education systems and partners so they can make better decisions. There will also be direct investments in each of the 5 jurisdictions to help grow those pathways. And again, IT is the focus area for this initiative. In each jurisdiction, it will be a partnership of the K-12 school district and higher ed partners. So in Montgomery County, there's a very strong collaborative effort across MCPS, Montgomery College, and USG to build a strategy for taking advantage of and participating in this initiative. So there'll be a big an investment in growing pathways and programs, and those pathways have to be articulated across K-12 and higher education, to my earlier point. And then the third thing is there will be a regional network created so that the educational institutions and employers in Montgomery County can be regularly meeting with their peers in DC, in Fairfax County, in Prince George's, and in Baltimore City to share ideas, to learn from each other, to collaborate. There may be articulation agreements that are built across county lines. There may be co-designed initiatives that grow out of this. There's a lot of room for partnership if we can create a space for the 5 jurisdictional teams to be regularly coordinating their work. At the end of the day, they're all going to be responding to a similar set of employer demands, and in each case, they're trying to grow opportunities for students like apprenticeships and internships that provide more exposure to these careers. So the more we can help organize the employer community and activate them across the entire region, we think the more that the jurisdictions can benefit and the more the jurisdictions can work together across jurisdictional lines, we think the further we can get as a region. I will tell you this is somewhat unique, but there is a growing appetite across the country for regional work. A lot of times it's within a state, not across 3 state lines, which makes this more complex. But in nearly every state we're working with where they've set really ambitious educational attainment goals all the way through post-secondary, they're beginning to realize that the real work has to happen at a regional level in the states where the economic structures exist and where employers, again, think about hiring and talent needs, and that the school systems and higher ed institutions need to come together in those regions to build their programs and their pathways and be more responsive to the employer demand. So I think you have an opportunity to be out front. You have a great opportunity because JP Chase is investing $10 million in this initiative, and I think they and others will be looking to it as a model for what they do elsewhere around the country, and hopefully you can figure out how to leverage it and keep this work going beyond this initial grant period. So I just wanted to flag this. Perfect timing for your hearing, and I think great opportunities for Montgomery County to leverage it and to lead the country as an example for regional work.
That is fantastic. Really appreciate that presentation. Not knowing at the time that Will Jawando had been involved in that project, I saw the press release when MCPS announced the partnership with JP Morgan, and I found your company in that press release, and then reached out to you, and then subsequently learned about your involvement with MCPS and the work, and I saw your presentation, I read your report, and I thought it was fantastic, and then also excited to hear that we have an expert on the council who will be helping us build this out, as well as again, I have to say again, every council member, certainly at this dais, has a long history here or a lot of passion. I'm not going to give you a long history, Andrew, but a lot of passion here as well. And I bet you do have actually a lot of history in your state work. So there's just a lot of initiative and force coming on the council side to expand what we do. I will turn it to my colleagues, but a few things that kind of jump out to me. First of all, everything that you explained is really powerful. It seems to me like what you're building towards is precisely what the educational institutions should be doing, and I think it kind of, stepping back, it leaves the question, what's the county's function here? Because the school institutions don't just operate within their lane. This is ultimately a whole county and even state initiative. So you're, I think, pointing. You're building a structure. You're kind of devising a methodology. But I think the county should be studying this and then figuring out how do we augment. What's our role? The primary job of bringing employers into this conversation seems like, it's a lot for MCPS to take on. I think you'd take it on in your way. You'd take it on, to suit your purposes. But I wonder if we couldn't, just as one example, provide support to this whole initiative, kind of rolling it up into something that is, big. The part of the inspiration here, talking about the tech talent pipeline, I was doing some more research, and New York actually has a whole initiative called the Tech Talent Pipeline, and they bring together their education institutions and their employers and their workforce development and their economic development officials, and it's very methodical. They are identifying where the gaps are in the economy. They have these signaling systems, as you described, and then they have their educational institutions figuring out how to make changes, and it's just a living, breathing process that is supported on a wider government basis, and I think we ought to build something like that, here. And fortunately, you're already doing, a big piece of this. So I think again we can study this and then figure out how to build on it from there. Let me continue gathering my thoughts, and I'll turn it to my colleagues. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to defer to the council
you.
president. Who's
I couldn't tell whose on was first. I apologize.
Sorry.
Ms. Navarro.
Thank you. Well, I just really want to follow up on your comments, and it is exactly what I'm thinking about as I'm hearing this presentation, because I'm constantly reflecting on the fact that, for example, the county council, makes all of these land use decisions, and we were very busy passing a lot of master plans, and they were all really geared towards leveraging many of the assets that we already had. And I'll give you an example. Let's say Viva White Oak. So we recognize that we have different assets. We recognize that we already have an industry here. We also recognize that we have a school system that is very diverse, with a very large student population that is not doing so well, but with a lot of potential for us to ensure that these young people can see themselves reflected in a lot of these future jobs. So for example, in Viva White Oak, We had a coding initiative at Springbrook High School. I invited Jonathan Jen. He brought the renderings from what could happen at Viva White Oak, and these students were able to see exactly what was coming and hopefully visualize that, hey, maybe I never saw myself coding, but look, I can have access to these jobs in the near future. So what I'm saying is that as we have all these conversations, which have dominated, I think, a lot of, all these different reports, and there's the SAGE report, and there's all these conversations, we tend to miss this really most important opportunity to align everything that we're doing. Because if the county council then is in charge of, for example, making these land use decisions that set the stage for this future, job growth, sort of life science village opportunities, and we also are in charge of providing the funding for the school system, and we can look at some regulatory issues that might promote, job creation and expand our tax base, but we're not necessarily working together, right? The school system is doing this, which is awesome, with USG and Montgomery College, which is awesome. But this notion of working on parallel tracks is something that we really need to just address. And I do wonder sometimes, I know that like in some jurisdictions, the political will is not necessarily there, right? And sometimes it comes from sort of this pushing. I think here is the opposite. And so I'm looking at, what are the next steps to, for example, follow the example of New York City in order to turbocharge this, area. Because we have all these assets in place and we've done all these things. So now we have Worksession Montgomery and we have, this opportunity going on. But how do we turbocharge it? Because we don't have a lot of time to continue to rethink this. I love how intentional it is. It's exactly what we need. But we can't continue to do it sort of in this silo mode. And I think that's been a bit of the frustration that, we kind of hear from the private sector and the business community. It's sort of like, yeah, you talk about all these things, but where are the targets, right? We want numbers. We want to see. We need that blueprint. So in your opinion, as you're doing all this work around the country, so what are some of those kinds of models that have incorporated, all of the stakeholders that you see, can work very well? And the secondly, my other question is this notion of who we are in Montgomery County, right? So in your work, in similar jurisdictions, how do you then incorporate and engage, the immigrant community, African-American community? In this moment in time, those are the groups that comprise the largest proportion of MCPS students. What has been done to also engage that community and then prepare those students so that they can be part of this pipeline as well?
Great points and great questions. On the first, avoiding the siloed effect of doing this work is a major challenge across the country. I think you have a great opportunity. I'm already seeing the partnership emerging among the K-12 and higher ed partners here in Montgomery County. Believe it or not, in most parts of the country, that is very siloed work. Community colleges are doing their own thing, working hard to build these programs and work with employers and align their systems. K-12 school systems are doing it not that well, frankly, and they're doing it on their own. Here you have a chance where Montgomery College and MCPS are sitting at the same table, and hopefully they're going to co-design an approach to working with employers and looking at this labor market information. And you have the added benefit of a four-year institution that understands the importance of that and is squarely at the table, which is also difficult to do in other parts of the country where a lot of the four-year institutions don't feel like that's their job. The council could be uniquely positioned to help ensure that the economic development strategy that you're driving is also what's driving these decisions that the education partners are making about the direction of the school system. And you mentioned data. I could imagine a very rich kind of process that could be put together to make sure that the right kind of data is driving the decisions that are getting made, and that everyone has access to that same data and is having a regular conversation that you are a part of about what are the priorities for the pathways that we're building, and where do we see the economic trends moving, because we're constantly looking at this with the economic development team here in Montgomery County. I would encourage you to be looking beyond Montgomery County when you're looking at those trends, and creating a cycle of decision-making and information sharing that brings those actors together around alignment of the educational pathways with economic development opportunities. That would be honestly transformational, I think, for Montgomery County. And if you do it right, I believe you could address the second priority you put on the table, which is the inequities. Because this is for all students, and Montgomery County has a lot of diverse students that it's educating now. I think to the school system and the higher ed institutions' credits, they have acknowledged that, and they have different initiatives to try to address equity gaps. But until you connect it with this conversation about economic opportunity, sometimes that can ring hollow,
Yes.
right? So all of this is about creating opportunity for young people, opening doors to real opportunity, understanding the economic shifts that have taken place, connecting with families so they know that this is the ticket, truly the ticket to opportunity, and that the parents may not have had. But then you have to kind of put your money where your mouth is on that, and you have to then be able to follow through and show results. And that's where you could be asking those regular questions. Where are the results? Where have we changed the programs? Show me the programs we phased out and the new ones we've built. Show me the alignment of those programs with the credentials that employers are asking for in this field, Let's regularly review the data. I think that could be, as I said, transformational here in the county. And you may be able to be part of that same dialogue with surrounding counties in a way that creates more of a kind of a macro conversation about the region rather than just a micro conversation about the county.
And could that then also leverage that private funding component? I mean, you talk about JP Morgan. I mean, are there other opportunities that, for example, jurisdiction that does all this very hard work, potentially, right, would be able to leverage private funding to scale this up or to at least look at some innovative?
I think so. I mean, you're already about to do that right now. I think if you can show real success and movement and change, I think there will be other private funding opportunities. And, and as you know, these private funders are always looking to make sure that you're driving public dollars toward the same ends to sustain these initiatives or to, scale these initiatives. So to the extent, again, you're in a unique position probably to do that. So that the schools aren't simply relying on a relatively speaking, a small grant to do big things. And if these funders see that happening, then they're more likely to want to come back and do more. And as I said, there are probably a lot of philanthropies and corporations right here in this area who, if they see something compelling and they understand how it's going to connect not only with their corporate social responsibility goals, but with their talent development goals, they may be more interested in co-investing or making sustainable investments in this work, even if other foundations kind of move around the country and keep investing. But great opportunity if you leverage it.
Great, thank you.
Will?
Thank you. So to that point of drilling down, Scott, I wanted to ask you just a couple specific questions based on the slides and the effort that you're doing based on the ESG study of a couple years ago, which I think is great, and I'm glad we're moving in that direction. I saw Dr. Smith this morning, and we were talking about some of the work around Edison and wanting to expand these opportunities up county, other places. So that would be one of my questions. But if you could just, before we go there, could you talk a little bit about the rebranding? Because as you know, one of the huge issues here, historically here, but across the country, has been this issue of CTE is for the kids who aren't going to college and aren't as smart and are kids of color, and the tracking issues that we've seen. And so I know there was some discussion when I was involved of just totally changing the name, right? Not even calling it CTE. Could you give me an update on where that, because I think that's so critical to parents and families. I think that's a big part of it, the marketing and branding strategy around, so that they see these are great pathways, because what I'm worried about is that you have some parents that pick it up sooner than others, and then you have the reverse equity issue. You got all certain types of kids that are navigating the system in these programs, and then we don't have the kids that really need it, and it's not as widely available. So could you just talk about the branding aspect of it?
Sure. So to answer your question, we have just started to very deliberately and strategically in flyers, in resource documents that counselors have, other materials that parents may see, stop saying CTE, just as a strategy. We've been working with our communications folks in MCPS to develop basically a value proposition of why this is so critical. It's not because there's these two tracks and you have to pick one. It's everything that we're talking about here today about economic opportunity in the future. So one of the taglines, for example, is early edge. Like you're basically getting an early edge on your career path. And so that's an example of some very discrete branding that we've been doing. And quite frankly, it's coming from our former students.
Yeah.
Part of this effort, we've been out talking to former graduates who are out in the world of work, who went to Thomas Edison High School, or who completed a program of study in MCPS, who went through one of our pathways and now have one of these high-demand, good-paying jobs. And we talked to them, and every single one of them, to students, didn't say anything about all the AP courses I took. They talked about these pathways and how it gave them an edge, gave them a leg up. It made me stand out. And it was just a persistent theme within everybody we talked to. So that's an example of how just talking to our graduates is helping inform our branding. Much work to be done, though. This is, kind of phase one of all this work, of a long-term strategy. Rebranding and names and flyers is only going to go so far until we have results, till we truly have those high-quality programs that are growing and others that may be phasing out. And so we think that part of the rebranding is also a longer-term issue.
And I think, please keep in touch with us on that, because I think we're all talking about this, and if you talk to all 9 of us, we'd all say something different. We'd say CTA, we'd say technical skill, we'd say, if you had Mr. Katz up here, he'd say something different than I would say. And so I think we need to be a part of that as you're developing it, as we're out there talking to parents and students and community members, and I would say that for our higher ed colleagues as well, because we all need to be swimming in the same direction. So the work-based learning opportunities, we have internships in the schools. We added a summer program a couple of years ago. I had a little bit involved with that. And then we have things that kids are doing just on their own. Talk to me about the alignment of instruction in the classroom. We saw it on the slide, expectations, understanding what you're going to get into in the workplace, and then actually trying to integrate these work-based programs, whether it be in the school year or the summer or any time. How are you thinking about that, and what's the progress on that front?
Quite honestly, it's a huge gap for us right now because it's not systematic. So in some pathways, we have work-based opportunities, business industry partners, where there are robust, seamless ways that work-based experience are seamless into the pathway that students are experiencing. In other places, maybe not so much. For example, we have internship coordinators in all 25 high schools, but the function of that job may look different in 25 different ways. Just this past year, MCPS identified a new position, a supervisor of strategic industry partnerships, brand new position in our district. Really an outcome of the report, to make much more systematic the work-based learning opportunities that are tied to specific pathways like the ones we're talking about today.
So more work to do.
More work to do, and all too often those internship opportunities are very much kind of what's available in that local high school neighborhood.
Right.
And so that's something that's close and accessible to a high school junior or senior. And so again, it's an example of us having to really look much more systematically.
Yeah.
And, getting our business partners to be all in on this.
Right.
Just like with Summer Rise and how we, got industry and our local businesses to work with us on Summer Rise, we need to do the same thing with all these work-based opportunities. That to bring it to scale is really hard, and we need industry partners to do it.
I couldn't agree with you more, and again, consider us a partner, and we'll help you work with that funding and otherwise. The last question is something I'm concerned about, is the equity of these programs around the county. And I know Seneca Valley, there were plans, and now we've seen the proposed budget, which may slow that down. Talk to me about your long-term, medium and long-term strategy on expanding the great things that happen at Edison to other parts of the county.
So, as you know, Thomas Edison High School's been here for a long time, as our sort of career and technology high school, if you will. And the current model is students travel up to an hour from all different places of the county to get there. And so the first thing is establishing more regional access. So I'm excited about Seneca Valley, for example, which will open in the fall of 2020. and go from a student population of about 1,300 to over 2,500 with a brand new facility. So we're working to ensure that, number one, most, if not all, of the programs that are available at Thomas Edison will be available at Seneca Valley, so that now we at least have two hubs, if you will, to at least make it closer and more accessible for students. But the other thing that we're doing is ensuring that there's a much better strategy for how the other programs are dispersed across the county. You know, if you look back in time, programs popped up for different reasons at different times. You know, maybe a principal was passionate about a particular program, or there was a great teacher in another, and as a result, this sort of inequitable disbursement happened. So what we're building is infrastructure and processes to allow for choice, so that, number one, you have to be aware. So we need to make sure that everybody's aware of these programs, but number two, that if it's not available in your local school, we're going to be ensuring that there are ways for you to access a program that's nearby, not traveling all the way down to Edison. It might be at Seneca Valley, but it may be in other high schools whose doors are open for students in that region of the county.
That's helpful. Thank you.
All right. Andrew.
Thank you. First off, Matt, I just want to thank you not only for a great presentation but for your activism locally at BCC High School, particularly my mother's alma mater, and a great high school in District 1, and you've been tremendously active there and providing access to a lot of students. I appreciate that service as well as your day job here, and that probably feels like a full-time job as well sometimes. So I appreciate that, and I wanted to note that. I mean, this has been a great discussion. I do believe we're uniquely positioned here in Montgomery County to address this. I think the siloing has been a huge challenge for us. I'm sure, as you mentioned, it's a challenge everywhere, but I think we have some assets that few other places have, if no other place have, and not just the federal government that we always think about, but having a great community college, having universities at Shady Grove, and access to 11 universities around the state. I mean, that is a unique and tremendous opportunity that we have to connect folks, not just to four-year college, but just to the different programs, the different assets that those bring. And I think this is particularly interesting to look at how we're connecting those two institutions with the school system, and then also our private sector and nonprofit partners, which I think we need to do a lot more of and haven't done as well as we could to, basically ensure that we are as good as the sum of our parts. And I think we've always had amazing parts, but the sum of our parts, could be better. I mean, I think we talk often in philanthropy of, give where you live, and that has been, a big focus over the last 15 or 20 years. And I'm thinking of this conversation as learn where you can earn. And the idea of sometimes that means going to college and going to graduate school or professional school and earning in that path, but it also means getting the technical education or whatever we are going to call it, the early edge, I should say, in order to be prepared for whatever career path you choose. And so just thinking about that as a real focus of making sure our young people are learning where they can earn. And I think every young person, I mean, I know when I was younger, the one thing that we all wanted to do was make money. And I think that is something that is shared by everybody, and it could be making money in different ways. It could be pursuing a career in different ways, and not everybody wants to get rich, but they want to have some independence as a middle schooler or a high schooler, and earning money is independence. And so, I think having a focus there, and I think the other area that we're uniquely positioned is the diversity. I mean, particularly when talking about our tech pipeline, I mean, there are few industries that I can think of that are more diverse than technology, and then technical jobs, and having a citizenry here that's increasingly diverse. That's 1/3 foreign born, and that number is growing. I think we're really well positioned to deal with that, and that's why I think eliminating these silos are so important and getting out of the idea of the single track. So I wanted to focus a little bit on that single tracking of you're either in career and technical education or you're not, because there's a lot of, particularly today, every job, every person, whether you go to a four-year school, graduate school, professional school, you know, the person who has that early edge in the technical side is a much more attractive candidate. Somebody who has a law degree who can code is awfully attractive as an applicant to a job, and so you know, I think everybody needs it. And so, just focusing on that a little bit, you mentioned the idea of, you know, Edison and having just one hub, and now with Seneca Valley having 2 hubs. I think that's a start, and that's a good step in the right direction of not having an hour bus ride. But I'm just wondering, in terms of what we're doing and where we're working towards, and what the kind of best practices are, what other folks are doing. You know, when I think of housing, you know, we used to have this idea of subsidized housing and place all the people who need subsidized housing and all of the government support, public support for subsidized housing in one area. And the effect of that was that it ghettoized, unfortunately, some of those areas, and it made it, you either lived in a subsidized building or you lived in a market rate building. And so we've changed that model, and Montgomery County really led the way on that with inclusionary housing. And I'm just wondering if there's thoughts to having a high school where, you know, we're now 2, where that's the focus and it's career and technical education, as opposed to having programs within every school, so you're not shipping a group of students off to an area away from their friends, away from their community on longer bus rides, and maybe losing access to after-school activities or some of the other areas that they might want, whether there are other ways that other folks do that, and how we can chime in. So I don't know if, Matt, you could kind of speak to the national trend, and then it kind of piggybacks a little bit off of Councilmember Jawando's comments about what's the medium and long term. Are we thinking about, you know, providing more of these programs, particularly now that we're not looking at them as exclusively single track? So if we could start with the kind of global and then, speak to the specific.
No, I think you're on the right track, so to speak, when in your comments. And I think when you look around the country, first of all, everyone's grappling with the issue that Will mentioned about the stigma associated with the previous approach to CTE or vocational education. Everyone's trying to overcome that. The places that are doing the best job are directly tying those pathways into college. They are showing that, in fact, they're building dual enrollment and early post-secondary opportunities into those pathways, rather than saying you got to go over there and take those courses. No, they're actually part of the pathway. You're gonna have early post-secondary opportunities. You're gonna earn college credit. You're gonna get a head start on college, so by the time you arrive in college, you actually have earned credits and you're shortening your time to degree. So one theme I want to get on the table is the highest quality, most cutting edge CTE we're seeing around the country is actually embracing college readiness and building college credit opportunities and building stronger partnerships with community colleges, rather than the way it used to be, which was kind of bifurcated. So to me, that says, how do you do more of that here in Montgomery County? How do you build programs that are both and from the get-go? How do you build those pathways? How do you reduce time to degree? I mean, in this regional project we're talking about in Fairfax, they're thinking of potentially doing an early college high school with this grant to try to start an early college technology high school. Admittedly, they're starting with one, but they're trying to figure out if they could scale it so that they can do exactly what you're describing, try something new, build a partnership with higher ed.
The idea there is then you could graduate a 4-year in 3 years or a 2-year in 1 year.
Yeah, or you can,
Drive the cost down.
in an aggressive case, you could graduate with an associate's degree coming out of high school, right? Because you're combining the 2 models, and there are examples of that around the country. And then you can continue on if you need to get a 4-year degree, because then a lot of many of the IT jobs that are available in the DC region in particular do require bachelors. Some of that is driven by the federal government and hiring there, but you just want to be mindful of what the realities are of the economic kind of hiring decisions that employers are making here. But the other thing I want to mention is in polling that's been done about CTE, the number one concern of parents is that it's not connected to post-secondary. So even the CTE community nationally has now begun to say, we are going to make this about post-secondary preparation and college, not the alternate pathway. So this is happening. It's starting to happen all over the place. Your issue about equitable distribution of these opportunities, or let me put it differently. Why not have this in all comprehensive high schools in Montgomery County? Why should you have to create two separate places?
Effectively, my question.
And it's exactly the right question. In my view, if we were doing the right thing by students, every high school would be having very ambitious AP, IB opportunities, but they'd also have a Project Lead the Way type program, which is, you look at Wheaton High School here, there's an example of a high school that is embracing academics and kind of career education in a very rigorous way, because they've built programming that combine the two, and the expectations for students are you're going to do both. I think that's what should happen in all Montgomery County high schools. Frankly, it would help my kids who are at BCC High School to have had more exposure, or to have more exposure to career opportunities and pathways, and have that blended in to their experience, rather than when they take a course or two like that, frankly, it's just to check the box. So that's a challenge, because not many school systems have figured out how to make this part of the comprehensive high school experience for all students. I think if Montgomery County can do that, it would be paving the way. Right now, at least, you've got going from 1 to 2 centers where you're going to build these deeper experiences. And I will say the hard part about doing this in every high school is it costs a lot of money to have the technology available or the infrastructure available for some of the programming in some pathways. So you'd have to be really creative about when do you need to go to those centers, what can you build into the comprehensive high schools. But to me, it starts with having a vision and a commitment, and of all the leaders in the county, this is what we want the experience to become. Let's figure out how to get there.
Just to build on that, before I ask specifically of what is that vision, and where do we go from here once we have the 2 regional centers, which admittedly resolve some of the issue, but still maintains it's just a lesser problem of an existing problem to have it closer to young people. But are there opportunities to allow for some online education, so you can do online classes and have that available in every school, so you wouldn't have to leave for, except, with particular programs or particular classes. I mean, I understand you can't build certain labs in every school. I mean, there are resource constraints and a number of levels. I mean, is there an opportunity to move, rather than busing students, moving teachers? And so you have teachers part-time in one school and part-time in another school as more, of a specialist type model. I mean, are there any opportunities within the obvious resource constraints on the, both the operational and the capital side, which I recognize are real? We certainly can appreciate them here, but are there any opportunities or thoughts of ways within, relatively existing financial constraints of, ways to provide access to more students for these programs and these opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad this has come up, because what's really happening here is a reimagination of high school. That gone are the days where every single student goes to school for 4 years, for 7 periods a day, and you check the boxes on your path to filling out your college applications, and on you go. So we need to make sure that in every single one of our high schools, there is a solid academic foundation. There are career-related experiences. There are technical skills that are going to prepare students for post-secondary education and the world of work. I'm also, thinking about the opportunities to earn college credit earlier. We are exploding in our county the opportunity to start an associate's degree at the junior year in high school. And so this past year, we had a couple of graduates who graduated from MCPS with their associate's degree, but we have a pipeline of about 200 who are going to start in the fall, and it's going to go exponentially from there. And there are students from every single one of our high schools represented now in our early and middle college programs. But what we need to ensure is absolutely in all 25 high schools that this vision for academic foundation, technical skills, career-related experiences are part of what you experience in high school. That does bring innovative models, online courses, absolutely. Flexible schedules. Students who, as a senior, are ready to move on and just exclusively go to college and work. And so thinking about flexible schedules for young people is also a part of this conversation. Now, there are times, like with facilities, that we can't do a construction mall 25 times, or, our engineering labs, maybe we have to disperse them, or, some of our other specialized programs, which, then you do need hubs like a Edison and a Seneca Valley, or regional quadrants, or depending on the facility needs, to spread them out across the county. But I think we all have to emphasize here that strong programs in every single one of our high schools is where this vision needs to lead. And then there's our hubs and our college and career academies and others. But I'm glad you brought that up, because it's a really important point to emphasize.
All right. I'm going to ask a few questions, and then Councilmember Navarro, and then we'll go to the next panel. I wanted to just get your reaction to the potential of developing a tech talent pipeline general plan. I mean, you've essentially been building something that's analogous to that for the school. What are the gaps? Maybe whoever wants to answer, but I think I'm directing this more to Matt, since it's potentially that purview. But what do you think are some of the missing pieces? You mentioned making sure that it's driven by the economic development strategy, for example. That was a light bulb here.
Well, I would start there.
Yeah.
Since so much effort has been taken to kind of map out what the needs of the county are, where you want to grow, bring business in, and where you feel like the strengths are and where you feel like the gaps are. And I would have that more visibly drive the decision-making across the institutions about where to grow participation in pathways, and equally important, where pathways may need to be strengthened because they aren't actually well enough aligned to what the employer needs are. And this isn't about exclusively tying everything to employer needs, but it's just better understanding what those skills, competencies, and credentials are. Secondly, from the council's perspective, I would applaud and encourage and support the partnership across USG, Montgomery College, and MCPS. And I use all those verbs because it's just so easy. Every institution has their own agendas and boards and priorities and strategic plans, and it's really difficult to create that shared space, I've found, to kind of do this joint work in developing programs and articulated pathways. Oftentimes you'll see it with two institutions. USG and Montgomery College do a lot of work on this. I know MCPS and Montgomery College do work on this, but you have the possibility of all three institutions banding together and coming up with a new approach. And to me, that approach should begin by looking at that data and looking at what employer demands are and convening employers together. And perhaps there is a role for the council in that, rather than each of them doing it on their own, which is traditionally the way this occurs. And then the employers get frustrated because they're being brought to multiple meetings, talk about education. The left hand isn't talking to the right hand, and it's very difficult to keep employers. So you can get them to the table, but it's very difficult to keep them at the table if you're not making very good use of their time and showing them results. So there's a lot of work to be done there, but the seeds are kind of being sown for that. The programs themselves, the more you can do the kinds of things that Scott's talking about, in my view, where you are blending the educational pathways and students are starting out on the next part of the journey while they're still in the previous part and showing the interconnectedness, the better. So, how many articulated pathways truly exist in Montgomery County? One of the first things in this initiative that's going to be done in all 5 jurisdictions is to analyze those pathways and do a gap analysis and give information back to each jurisdiction about where could it strengthen those pathways. Well, that could be happening across the board here on a regular basis. What else comes to mind? Well, one thing I want to point out, the 3 boards are about to have a meeting in a few weeks. So the board, MCPS School Board, the Montgomery College Board, and the USG Board are meeting together just in a few weeks to talk about how to align the programs and work with the employer community. So this isn't just about the administration doing this work. The more I believe the boards feel invested and are sitting around the same table periodically comparing notes, looking at the data, asking these hard questions, the better. And again, the more you can encourage that, maybe there's a way to participate in some way to understand what comes of the joint board work, but that will ensure that there's longevity to these routines and that they don't rise or fall just based on the leaders who are leading the schools or the institutions at the current time. And again, to longevity, I think that the council could have a really important role to play in ensuring that this just becomes the way the county does education, and that the way the county approaches education in relationship to the economic goals that the county has. And that would, as I said earlier, be transformational. But the table has to get set, the data has to be available, the questions need to be asked on a regular basis. And the more I think you can make this part of the public, transparent conversation, it will continue to expose some of the equity challenges that Montgomery County has, and to its credit, it's been willing to take on. But transparency of data, I think, helps with that tremendously. Those are my initial thoughts.
That's terrific. Thank you so much. The data thing really jumps out at me. The next discussion, the data that we have for the next discussion is just, somehow it doesn't seem like we have a very strong understanding of the job data and the employment data. So clearly we have a need there. The comment that, Scott, that you made about the need for the jobs to be accessible to the students, so that, where they live may not match where the jobs are. I think that's a real challenge. We've got to, whether it's where the school is or where they live, one or the other has to be proximate to the jobs. I think about the invitations that I get to speak to a class. If it takes me a 3-hour commitment to drive to the school, do the class, and then drive back, there's only so many of those I could do, a year. But if the invitation is a 5-minute walk, then I could do that much more frequently. So I think the connection between the school and the employers and the proximity is really essential. I'd love to, for example, think about BCC in the future and the employers in Bethesda and Silver Spring and the employers, and what are we doing proximate to federal employers, FDA, White Oak, so on. Just last observation, the Ed Committee will be taking up the capital budget soon, and so we're hearing you about Seneca Valley and the urgency there, so it's something we ought to take a look at. Okay, Ms. Navarro.
Yeah, thank you. This is really great. This is, one of the, I would say, most substantive conversations that we have had regarding this issue. I think we've all thought a lot about this issue of aligning, but it feels real right now. And so that is in itself, I think, a big accomplishment. And I really do look forward to see how we can help, continue to amplify this particular effort. Circling back on the issue of equity, the council has embarked, along with the executive, on this notion of creating an equity policy, and the school system leadership, Montgomery College leadership, USG leadership, park and planning leadership, we all were there for a 2-day training on equity, because it is going to be so important for us to also keep that in back of our minds. This issue of internships is such an interesting one. My daughter graduated from BCC. She was able to literally walk to her internship. My oldest daughter graduated from Springbrook High School. It was a different story. The kids who also live in the East County, especially in the Briggs Cheney area, there are just really no job opportunities for them. And so to the extent that we look at, creative ways to identify where those geographic areas that have those gaps exist, and maybe try to put some pilots in there with some transportation support, it's huge, because we all know the role that internships play when the young person then is looking, for job opportunities. And, my daughters and I have had this conversation for such a long time. Even once you are in college, the notion of, paying for an internship, access to internship in New York City, for example, how many kids? And you see it in terms of who's there taking advantage of this. So we need to start here facilitating that in whatever way possible. And I think all of this conversation hopefully will uncover ways to do that. I do want to applaud MCPS for, I think that people don't appreciate how far we've come, because I served on the Board of Education precisely when we were having conversations about changing the narrative and reframing this particular piece. And that's like really evolved. I mean, when I toured Edison, wow. I mean, it's amazing. This, what you were describing, it's over. I mean, that notion of, tracking and thinking about it as it is for those kids or whatever, it's over. I mean, we're headed is just extraordinary. So, high level, really amazing in terms of the technology that is there. But now it is about how do we make sure that we provide the access and continue, through that branding to address that. So tons of opportunities, and I think the message that you're hearing is that, we want to be partners and we want to help definitely continue to amplify this. And so as you're making progress with the projects, please make sure that we get the information as well. And I'm sure that we'll continue to have briefings because, we are very much committed to making this feel real and especially for our private sector to make it worth their while and not just, one more meeting. So again, thank you. I look forward to the next conversation as well. Thanks.
Terrific, thank you. So quickly before,
And I will nominate myself talk to my colleagues to that joint board meeting. Someone needs to be there from us, and so.
I was gonna ask, I was gonna, send us invitations.
We will.
Yeah, I think a lot of people
Not
might
just
be
that, but
interested
all
in,
that.
Yeah, and I'll also send you some of the marketing materials we're developing, the value proposition I talked about, some the early edge campaign, if you will, so you have some talking points and some messaging around that.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your participation today. Thank you very much, Matt and Scott. If you'd like to just, remain through the next discussion, we invite you to do that. And we'll now call Ben Edson, Doug McLean, Ola Sage, Sanjay Rai, Ellie Giles, and Stu Edelstein, if you'll join us. Thank you again, Matt and Scott, for that terrific presentation. Okay. Since I know almost everyone else, you must be Ben Edson, so, all right, fantastic. Thanks for coming in today. And Gene, do you want to,
Actually, given the time, I was just gonna hand it over to Ellie, who
Great.
grabbed this group together, and
Thank you.
she can ask a couple questions. And I think my understanding is the panel will just go down through some of these questions
Terrific.
and lead to open discussion following that.
fantastic, thank you so much.
And while they get ready, Stu has handed me some pamphlets that I'll be passing around to council members, and it'll go on the public record.
I feel a little cool air coming in, thankfully. I
gonna
was
say,
starting to
I
get
was
pretty
starting to
warm,
pass
yeah.
out,
It was not just you, it was me too.
Good.
All right. Yeah. Ellie?
So, first of all, I really want to thank you all for starting this conversation because it's a very important conversation, not just even in the tech industry, but also across industries. So I'm hoping that we can focus today on our tech industry, but continue this conversation with other sectors as we talk about our economic development strategies and what are our targeted sectors. It's important that we have this strategy across all of those sectors so that we can continue to grow. I really loved everything that Montgomery County Public Schools had to say, and as we're moving towards career readiness and the world of work, it's such a crucial part of what our students need, and it sets that tone for the pipeline. So I think they're doing a great job, and I look forward to continuing to partner with them. We wanted to talk a little bit more about where we go within our industry sector and some of the successes we found as we're looking at in a talent pipeline development. And one of those successes is always to engage that industry, and that not just once, but always, continuously, because especially in the tech industry, the skill sets, the competencies change as the industry evolves. So we want to have ongoing conversations so that we can update the training, and I think it's important for industry to be talking with higher ed and with the high schools. So I am glad that we have this panel together to share a little bit about what is going on. WorkSource Montgomery has an MOU with MCPS, Montgomery College, and USG for that purpose, to help bring and be that connector of what the industry strategies are and helping with the curriculum. We really think that in order for this to be important, we don't look at the sector largely, but we start to target certain employment opportunities. So being very specific as we start to look at what we mean when we say tech, or what are the industries here in Montgomery County and in our region that, so that we're focused on our training and addressing the jobs of today and the jobs of the future. I agree, we talked a little bit earlier about the expanding diversity and expanding opportunities. This is where we really need to engage our community partners in a much more effective way in the workforce system, because they are going to be the ones that are going to help us with the pipeline of moving forward to increasing those opportunities across all of our residents. And we really need to take a look at us as as a county, making sure that we offer the resources such as training grants or those kinds of things to help those opportunities, provide those opportunities, and provide those hand-on, real-life experiences, whether it's apprenticeships, internships, work-learn experiences, customized training within our companies. So there's lots of ways that we can do it. Aligning with that also is making sure that we align the technical skills with what we call essential skills, or those skills that are required in workplace. So that we're hearing a lot from our companies when we meet with them that it's not just the technical skills, but being able to have good communications, problem-solving skills, understanding, time management, those kinds of things also overlay in any kind of technical training. So just some key points as we start to talk, but I wanted to move through. I think I'd like to start with the industry, just to have them tell you what their experience has been in addressing their talent pipeline, and hearing some of the things that Montgomery County is doing. What kinds of things would they like to see the higher ed do to better address that? So do you want to start, Ben, and I'll just slide down?
Sure.
Please, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. If just for the record, if people could name and like your business, so that we just know everybody who's talking.
Okay. My name is Ben Edson. I'm the founder and CEO of RQ. We're right off of Tower Oaks. So we moved into that space back in 2017 or 2000. Time flies, so it could be earlier. My background is a little bit different. I wasn't always a business owner. I came to the States when I was 18. I got my GED, which was I think something that was exciting to do because I was homeschooled in Argentina. So I'm kind of like an immigrant in some ways. I have 14 siblings, so I'm the second oldest. At 24, I wanted to join the military. Thought that would be a good way of making some money. So they told me in the Naval Academy that I needed to have a year of college education. So I started with community college. And during that year, I started my career path, I guess, in education, right? Which for the discussion here on policy is for most a great path to success. But I like to think of also that people are what drive a lot of that success. And so identifying those individuals is equally important. Today I have a dual degree and master's, so I got through a lot of my college. I graduated from Hopkins with an MBA and an MS in IT. Today my business has about 300 people. So we've grown from starting 15 years ago when I started the company at the downtown DC. And hiring people is a journey, right? So first I went to my friends and capable associates. I ran out of those and had to figure out how to acquire talent. Yes, so quite a few of them work in the company, which is great. But then when you run out of friends, how do you acquire talent, right?
Make new friends.
And you make new friends. So it is a journey, and some of it is mechanical, right? There's for us, we're in the high tech, so we have cybersecurity, we have a lot of development, we run some big systems for the government, we do some for commercial. But for me, it all comes back to who's going to be a great person that I can invest in for a long time, right? It's not just, I don't care necessarily about people that have great resumes and the great pedigree that only last a year or two. For them to be embedded into our customers and into our systems, they have to be trusted for a long time. So some of our most trusted folks was the son of my gardener. He He was, and I live in Montgomery County. All my kids go there. I think they're great schools. I have 4 kids. But the gardener came by, and he was just really dependable. He came to work every day, and his dad, so I was like, hey, what does your son do? He's going to school. He wants to get into technology. So I'm like, why don't you have him send me his transcript? And anyway, he's been working with us for a long time now on one of our big programs. Another person was from Brazil, right? So she didn't have any educational background. She's now a citizen. She just got accepted last week. She got her U.S. citizenship, and she's our manager in charge of quality.
You found her here, though. You didn't.
I found her in
from
Brazil. I found her in Brazil when I went there in the year 2000. I visited some friends down there, and she just stood out as somebody that was really engaging. So I went back in 2010, stayed at their place, and went to Carnival. Had some good time in Carnival, and they were
your job, man.
they were in hospitality, right? They were hospitality, and they're like, "Oh, sorry, I know you guys are from the United States, but I have to go wait tables." So it's just a culture of good people tend to be hardworking, and they're eternal learners, right? So in her particular case, she was waiting tables. Her husband was good with technology, so I hired both of them, and now they're both doing really good. Locally here, we have an amazing school system where you don't have to hitchhike to go to work. You don't have to worry about electricity shutting down. It's always, we just take it for granted that these things are going to be there forever, right? The worst is when my kids can't play their electronic games because the Wi-Fi is maybe touchy. But we have great infrastructure, and what I think we need more is in tying students to employers like myself is a better way of articulating how those people, how do you convert a story into an opportunity, which is the employer? And I think that's missing a little bit. How do you humanize statistics? And it's tough because we have so many great students coming out of schools. We have a lot of great people that are being retrained, but a lot of what we talk about is just statistics. How many resumes came through the desk? How did we do this? And the story is missing. So for me, when I hear a group of resumes that are going to come through, and somebody knows someone, and they know that family or that community or that employer, or that it's those intangibles that are what makes that person a great hire, I want to immediately put that person at the top of the stack, right? So we were involved with Summarize last year, and I was amazed by the high schoolers that actually came that wanted to intern with us, and they weren't somebody sending me kids. These were kids that volunteered and went out of their way to find these programs, and then they somehow figured out how to get to our place of work all on their own, a lot of times without their parents even being involved in it. So those are the types of hires that we want. The individuals with an aptitude to learn, the willingness to really pursue, and then the connectedness of it, to stay connected to those individuals throughout their journey. So I don't know what types of questions you want to ask me. We always are hiring. So we're in the cyber and IT fields. We do a lot of work for the government across the entire United States. The two primary ways that we go after contracts, there's two types of contracts. There's ones where our folks work on government site. That could be anywhere in the country. And then there's others where it's more mission critical, and those are client site at our facilities or on contractor site. So we have the contractor site. We can hire anyone we want. Those folks get embedded into our culture of how we do things, and we have great space here in Montgomery County, so our preferred location is to bring those folks here. So we're constantly looking for additional work, and then we hire from the area.
Terrific. Thank you. Why don't we continue through the employers, and I'll ask you to just kind of boil it down, so we'll come back to you with questions after we've heard from everybody.
Good afternoon. My name is Ola Sage, and I'm the CEO of CyberRx. And I'm just delighted to be at in this conversation. I'll talk a little bit about my background, but what was striking me as I was listening to the previous conversation was that I have been an employer in the county for over 20 years and had not been part of a conversation like this before. And so like Councilmember Navarro was mentioning, there's been a lot of progress made. And I think, just pausing to acknowledge that and celebrate it, even though there's a lot more to do, is worthwhile, because it would have been fantastic for us to have been part of a conversation like this. I have been a Montgomery County resident for scary 30 plus years. I was just doing the math and I was like, oh my. And I started my first company here about 20 years ago. It was an IT GovCon company, kind of like Ben's, and grew it in the county. There's a stat that I mentioned, which is not great, but we did a lot of federal government work, and I was in this county for over 13 years and never had an interaction with the local, our local government. And so that's what I mean by there's a lot of progress that has been made, and I just want to acknowledge that. I, like Ben, kind of immigrated here as well, came to the States for high school, but have lived in Montgomery County for, like I said, over the last 20 years. I started my first company here in Montgomery County and grew it, and I'm very fortunate and grateful to say we also had a successful exit last year. So I've kind of been what I would call the American dream in terms of being able to come here, really live out my passion. In the process, started a second company, and that's what I'm running today. Very different kinds of companies, though, and so our talent needs were also very different. So the IT company that I had was very heavily people based, because we provided IT technical services in integration, systems integration, cybersecurity, and those kinds of services. And so, and development. So we had a high demand for highly qualified, not qualified, they needed to have experience as well. And a lot of that was the demands that the government put on us, right? So they wanted you to have a bachelor's plus 8 years of experience, or a bachelor's plus 4 years. And so it became very difficult to find and keep those kinds of folks. So we implemented what, now it's called Unified Talent Management. I don't even know if you guys use that term, but it's essentially a mix of employees, contractors, and freelancers, right? And so we didn't just think in terms of employees. It was what could we pull together to basically address a customer requirement? And it was that mix for us. And in just talking with other CEOs in my field, that's a very common kind of formula, right? You have a mix of employees, contractors, and freelancers that make up your workforce. The kinds of skills we were looking for that were just really, really hard: Java developers, penetration testers, cybersecurity engineers, and those are still really the top in demand. I know there are a lot of new languages out here, but from an enterprise level, Java still dominates. And a lot of that has to do with cloud services as well. And so it's really different. And so as a result, it's very expensive, right? We're a small business. I mean, at peak, when we were probably in the 80 to 90 employee if we were fully staffed. So we were a small business, but kind of we weren't a micro small business. So, today we talk about the tech industry, right? But from my perspective, every company is a tech company, right? So you got fintech now, or financial services tech, or financial technology. You got comms tech. You got HR tech. You got, everybody is tech, and so we are constantly in competition for the same resources, and often at a disadvantage as the smaller companies. So.
That's what a disadvantage of a smaller company trying to hire for that talent in this region. In this county, that's a big issue for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. So for us, the two things I just wanted to add to the conversation, and I'm happy to take any questions you have, is one, where to look for these folks, right? So as I was listening to this conversation about all the great stuff with the need to have closer collaboration, which I think is absolutely essential, but there's a wall between that and what's happening on the employer side. Like, I can tell you, most of my CEO friends don't even know about all of this that's going on. And it's not because they don't want to know, but our heads are down, right? We're running our companies, we're trying to grow our businesses, and so we're not at these kinds of conversations. But I say a wall on its side is a bridge. So if we can still maintain the level of kind of focus that we have in our individual companies and businesses, but still figure out how to cross pollinate or, interact with each other, I think that would really go a long way. And then I just want to pick up on a point that Ben made about kind of the social and cultural piece to this, right? So yes, it's great to have somebody who's got all the technical skills, but if they can't get along with your culture in your company, it really doesn't matter. So I know in my company, we spent a lot of time kind of in our interview process looking at the soft skills, right? Equally, and sometimes more than the technical, because we felt we can train them, right? I mean, if push comes to shove, we can train them. But we really need people who have analytical thinking, who are collaborators. I mean, we had a whole list of here are the things that you need to be successful in our company. Positive attitude, communication, a lot of these soft skills. So I think as this conversation continues about whether it's marrying career readiness with career paths, that also is part of the conversation.
It's not soft anymore.
It's not
It's
soft.
not soft anymore.
Okay, well, what is it now?
Essential skills.
Oh, okay, I see. So we're still at our heads down. So my company now, thank you for that though, is more of a software company. So we have a cybersecurity software tool that companies use for risk assessments. So so I'm running a product company now as opposed to a services company, very different. And so we don't have the same kind of reliance on having employees per se, right? And so we still have the same challenges of talent, et cetera. And so we're looking for solutions where we can share this cost for high demand, positions. So for us, I was mentioning this term to Alexander, I never heard of that. But they're companies that essentially have software farms, right? And so that's all they do. They develop software for different companies. So it's not one company hiring one, developer or one, but it's, a company that hires 100 software developers, and then companies like me use, and so it's a fractional, it's sharing the cost of these high demand positions.
Thank you, all. We appreciate your work and the board especially as well on the EDC. Doug?
Thank you. As usual, in Montgomery County, we're surrounded by the most brilliant people. It's
Full introduction of yourself.
Oh, Doug McLean. I work for DAI company in Bethesda, Maryland. We do projects for USAID, DFID, World Bank around the world. We're a for-profit company. Been around 50 years, been in Montgomery County about 30 of those years at this point. I wanted something somebody sent me this morning I thought was interesting. Lockheed Martin, a company in the metro region, has a Alpha Pilot AI drone racing innovation challenge. $2 million on the line. So we probably all have kids who at least have a drone. But the reason I bring this up is that everything people have said here today I would have no concern with. What I feel is a little bit of a missing piece that shouldn't be overlooked is that Montgomery County, for my 15 years of living here, has always been a hotbed of creating employees. It's great at creating people that want jobs. In fact, my 3 children who graduated from here have jobs. They are employees. And that's all changing. We've got to shape. I think one of the reasons we lost Amazon, we don't promote innovation, and I would hate for this component not to recognize that innovation should be a big part of it. I know our company and other companies are doing it with the county. We've instituted an innovation program, an innovation challenge, where we find local companies that have a new product or service, we take them to our market. As a result of that, DAI's invested in equity in these companies to the tune of $1.2 million over the last few years to be able to do this. We also decided that because it fits our business needs internationally, as a strategic model, we opened a coding school. And so we've opened a coding school here in Montgomery County, and working with Ellie's group, who's helped us access state funds, working with other people here who run different centers, we've been able to get low-cost sort of school or facilities to be able to do it. And most importantly, we're offering our scholarship to people of diversity and women. Because I would disagree a little bit with one statement that the tech industry is diverse. It actually isn't. It's about 65% men. And we have to, white men in particular. So we need to figure out ways to do that. So we've been doing that. And the last piece I would say is what's helped us in the coding school is recognizing that it's not just bus ads, which we tried. It's not radio ads to find the students. It's not just Facebook ads or doing that. The communities that have helped us the most, or the Ethiopian community has sent us 20 students from Silver Springs because those people have previous careers, they have real world experience, and we've been able to help them develop a new set of skills so that they can develop them. DAI, it took me about 6 months to convince them to let me start a coding school. 100 DAI staff members asked and applied to take the first few introductory courses, which gave them the lexicon for what's going on in this area. So there's, I would not say any of this could replace the universities or the community colleges, but we can't have one size fits all, and we've really got to have different off-ramps for people. And don't forget that, as everyone's already alluded to, the strongest people we're going to develop in Montgomery County are going to be those people that are going to be innovative. They're going to be also wanting at times to get off and do something else, because the world's going to give them that opportunity. And that's where I think we're going to really grow our business, not by big companies coming in, but by small companies wanting to come here and people living here already start their own company.
Exactly. I think that's what this discussion is really all about in a lot of ways. Like, we didn't get the HQ2 of Amazon, but all the companies that are going to come here to serve Amazon or to spin out of Amazon, that could be that's our opportunity, right, is to capture that. That was a big part of the initiative for today. All right, shall we go to Dr. Rye and Dr. Edelstein and just hear some reactions, some comments you want to share?
Yeah, so, I've been listening to the panel, the previous one and this one. There's so much to say. In terms of numbers, if you look at just IT jobs in our region, a region means 50 miles radius from where we're sitting right now. From January of 2018 to November of 2018, we had about 287,000 postings, a lot of them, right? The point is that we have a lot of jobs in this region. Now, within IT jobs, the hard skills that are required for those jobs, penetration testing, and others, they keep changing. So Amazon Web Services, that's another thing. College offers these. Splunk, I mean, I don't want to bore you, but a lot of new things keep coming up, especially with the cloud and data. That thing has given new opportunities. And we at the college, we look at economic data. So we looked at about 18 months ago, there were no jobs for app developers with Swift coding language. Then suddenly within 6 months, it became 600 and now 1,400 postings. So college started offering.
At the college?
In this region, 1,400. But college started teaching coding classes with Swift. So the reason I'm informing you of this, because this is how college looks at economic activity, job postings, and then through our non-credit sites, we develop these things. The challenge here is not necessarily finding talent for the companies. Companies will continue to find talent in our region. It's a very rich, resourced area. my students are looking for jobs and they're not able to find jobs. That's there too. But I think diversifying our workforce should be our fundamental thing. So new things, and then how the new things are coming, like data and visualization. In last, I think, 35 days or so, there were 59,000 postings. So new opportunities and college offers things. In terms of early college conversation that we heard, we have 62 students getting associate degree in networking at Clarksburg High School. 3 years from now, they will get their associate degree. And employment too, there are so many jobs in that area, and they'll go to the college too. And I think that would be unique nationally, 62 high school students getting high school diploma and college degree at the same time in networking, where there are thousands of jobs. Some of them will work with very few. We started early college, Dr. Smith and Dr. Pollard, very bold program, bold leadership. There are lots of models of early college across the nation, but the one used here is very unique in the sense that a very efficient system. Is not lots of people, lots of position in terms of cost. It's very good. So the program is started this fall as a pilot. Next fall it will expand to almost 260 students, cybersecurity, computer science, health sciences, and hundreds of students are interested in those programs. Now, in 2 years, from fall of 2019, hundreds of these students will get associate degree and high school diploma at the same time, and cutting their college time almost by 2 years. That is significant. And not only that, they will graduate in the area where economy needs them. Right? So that's a very unique thing. We heard early college started starting in Virginia through JP Morgan grant, but we have already started that. So coding is a gateway skill to all the IT jobs. We can't predict today what kind of IT jobs will be there 3 years from now. Virtual reality, augmented reality, those things, data visualization, all that will be there. But coding is the first skill where the skill gap starts. So how do we take coding to elementary school? That's where we have maximum diversity. Now, so we are partnering with Apple, and we are launching an initiative called Montgomery County Can Code.
I've heard about this. This is exciting.
So this is modeled after Chicago. Chicago had an initiative called Everyone Can Code, and the mayor and mayor's office in Chicago played a very important role. What we have learned there that in Chicago, whatever mayor says, everyone follows. Somehow we are fortunate we don't have that situation, but
It's helpful in times, though.
but here I think we have lots of new thing, and one new thing I think is our Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. The CEO and president David Petter saw this as an important thing.
Yes.
And he will be convening all of us, businesses, industries, community organizations, USG, MCPS, all of us working together to take this coding to youth. Don't expect youth to come to coding, right? In Chicago, it's very successful with disconnected youth. Chicago has about 56,000 disconnected youth. And the kind of Apple coding is it makes everyone interested in coding, including a 3-year-old. We went through an exercise and we were able to code. So our county has 7,200 or so disconnected youth. Think about taking that opportunity and making them interested in coding. That's the part of the pipeline. Yes. We have more diverse folks interested. After that, this is specific things that company needs. We do very well in that area. I don't think we have too much of a problem. It's a very dynamic situation. So systems of workforce that were created in 1917 and 80s, they were created for manufacturing and service economy where skill set requirements didn't change as much. Right. most communities are still relying on similar system. And we know that we don't know what will work. We need some kind of ecosystem. But the systems that were created for a different kind of environment, where diversity was not issue, things that change so fast that were not the issue, they are not going to deliver us the same results. Today, in my elementary school, I participated in a geographical bee, and they asked me a question, what is Amazon? I gave a right answer.
It's in Seattle.
But today that's probably not the right answer, right? Today, Amazon means a company that almost made a good decision about their headquarters. So we have we have to understand what the problem is. Often, we have a solution, and we look for a problem, right? So we have a good understanding of a problem. We are on the right path. We have lots of good pieces in our ecosystem, and then we have to kind of move forward with that. Thank you.
That's terrific, thank you. I'm glad to hear the reference to David Petter, who's here, and we'll hear more, I'm sure, soon about that initiative that he's spearheading. And Stu, what can you bring us home here?
Well, I just, Stu Edelstein, Executive Director, University of Shady Grove, and Associate Vice Chancellor, University System of Maryland. You know a good deal about University of Shady Grove, it's been mentioned today many, many times. We are a partnership of 9 universities, bringing baccalaureate and graduate education into the county. We're about 3,000 plus students right now. I think what's important is we focus our degrees on what the workforce needs are in the region. Our students are, 75% of them come from Montgomery College, who go into the baccalaureate program, and we have the highest degree completion for transfer students in the state of Maryland. 75% of our students who come to us in a 4-year period will get their baccalaureate degrees. The other thing that's really important is 50% of the students who come to us are first in their families to get degrees. We are the most diverse campus in the state because we have no minority population. And our students, the other thing about USG that I think is important as a foundation for this conversation is over the 20 years or 19 years that we've been in existence, 11,000 degrees have been produced through the universities that participate at USG, and 90% of the students who get their degrees are working in the region. So they stay local. We are here to make sure that we can provide and educate a local workforce, opportunities for people who live here to be able to work here. So we have an exciting story because we're about ready to open a big STEM building. The county was instrumental in helping us to get the funding for that building. They provided $20 million to build a garage, and the state invested $173 million to build a STEM building. It's a 220,000 square foot building. If you looked at the facilities at Shady Grove right now, Building 1, Building 2, and Building 3, you combine them, the 3 of them would fit into this new building that we're about to open in the fall. And half of the building are laboratories. Laboratories designed to teach engineering, computer science, translational life science, bioscience. It is going to be a tremendous asset. It's going to be a signature building for Montgomery County in the STEM area. We already have a tremendous partnership with Montgomery County Public Schools and Montgomery College. You heard we're building on that partnership. And we're focused on working with employers to make sure that we know what those employers need in the way of skills, and working with them to bring the degrees. But I want to talk about a couple of things that are really important for us as we think about being successful. And Nancy mentioned one of them that I'm very concerned about and very interested in, and that's building Pathway. Pathway is not just about curriculum. It's also about thinking of yourself and knowing about what the opportunities are, thinking that you can go to college, thinking that you can be a computer scientist, that you can be an engineer. And this is work that we need to do together to make sure that the students who are in the school system, as early as we can reach them, see themselves as in these careers. And then, as we get them interested in seeing themselves in the careers, we have to give them the academic tools that they need to be successful moving through their K through 12 into their higher ed curriculum. We can't do that without a partnership, one, across the institutions, and most importantly, with the businesses. Businesses, because one of the critical elements in success is having work experience, knowing what the environment is, being able to see yourself in that environment. And the tech industry, I agree, is not very diverse at this moment. We need to make it more diverse. The other thing that we're doing at USG, and I know Montgomery College is doing the same thing, is not just the degrees and not just work readiness, but opportunities to teach and support innovation, to teach and support entrepreneurship. Half the students at our university are first in their families. The largest percentage of new businesses comes from immigrant and first-generation students. We know we have a population, and you talk to students at USG, and they come because they want to get a job locally, they want to get the education they need to get into that industry, but if you probe a little bit, they want to start their own businesses. They want to own something. We have to give them the opportunity to do that. And I think for the way that we're working, we're going to be able to move that, because embedded in our work and embedded in Montgomery College's work are facilities that will support innovation, support entrepreneurship, to be able to work with companies that are developing, be able to work with students who want to develop their own companies. This is the work that we need to do together. We cannot do this separately. We can't leave MCPS to do its work without connecting to MC, without connecting MC to USG, and without connecting that to the workforce. It is an integrated system that we need to build.
So talk to me about how we build that. You know, a strategic plan for the tech talent pipeline, something like that. What do we need to do? Who do we bring together, and what's a timeline to?
I think we're doing that now. In one, looking at data. We look at data, Montgomery College looks at data, MCPS is beginning to look at data, connecting that data to a conversation about what it means for our work together, connecting that to industry. One of the things to remember is that the industry that we're dealing with, tech especially, tech is going to impact every single industry that we have. Every single job, every single career is going to have technology competence. The jobs that are today are going to be changing in 2, 3, 5 years from now. We have to be nimble in terms of our ability to adapt to what's going on in the workforce. We can't do that as educators only. We have to work with our business partners and understand where they're going and how to support them. Bigger partners, you know, the Lockheed Martins of the world, they have infrastructures that will support internships and opportunities. They're looking for talent. They want to build talent. The smaller companies don't have those infrastructures. We have to get students in those companies as well, and we have to figure out how to help them bring students into their companies when they can support to do that by themselves. These are challenges that we have, but they're good challenges, because I think we can make it work. It will just take a lot more working together and a lot more looking critically at the data and holding ourselves accountable. It's not just the school system is producing students that will go into MC or USG. We all are responsible for those students. And the other thing to think about that's really critical is that there is no one pathway to get a job. There is no one pathway to develop certifications. Students will go out of MC, get some certifications, MCPS, get some certifications, work, go to MC, may decide to continue for a while, and then need to come back into the higher education system to get a baccalaureate degree, and even post-baccalaureate degrees. So the workforce system needs to be, and the education system needs to be much more flexible, much more nimble, much more adaptable to the way in which people need the skills to be able to access the jobs. And we have work to do in that area. My university partners have work to do in that area. It's not that you go full-time and you get a degree. You need to be able to work. You have to support yourself. You need to be able to adapt to changes in your workplace. We need to figure out how to do that. And I would say to you right now, we don't do it very well.
So you think there's a need for more data to pull the right institutions together?
Stronger collaborations,
stronger
right,
collaboration.
which are ongoing, which we build it into the infrastructure. We're going to be not only teaching students with these skills in computer science and engineering, we need to teach teachers in engineering and in computer science. School system woefully inadequate with numbers of teachers who can teach these subject matter. If they don't understand the world of work and how these skill sets are being applied, how can they educate and encourage students to enter these careers? We have a lot of work to do to build this infrastructure and to build this connectivity.
Thank you. Well, council members, questions, comments? Ms. Navarro.
Yeah, thank you very much. And all of these presentations were super informative. I think each of you really does bring a very important lens to this massive, I think, challenge. But as always, and as it was mentioned earlier, I think the great news is that we do have in Montgomery County a lot of resources and a lot of asset and a lot of talent. And folks, like you in industry who are willing to take time out to be able to communicate with us to see how we can enhance all of this. So it's all just very, very exciting. I wanted a couple of areas, and I forgot to say that at the outset. I mean, one of the reasons why I decided also as council president this year to make sure that every time we would talk about workforce development, that we have this as a joint committee of education, culture, and the planning and housing economic development, because we ourselves have to also integrate the way that we do our work. And before it was just kind of all these separate committees, right? So we need to do that as well, because this is a policy area that is broader than just education or just economic development or just housing, et cetera. And so that's part of what we're trying to also adapt ourselves into what we're trying to pursue out there. With Montgomery College, I'd love to follow up with you, Dr. Rai, regarding the coding initiative. The Hispanic Heritage Foundation has been doing this amazing national effort as well, and they have extraordinary programs teaching coding to students who are, ESOL students as well. And so I hope that we can kind of leverage that and make that a component of this Apple initiative, because it's amazing. And I've done some of that already in Montgomery County. It's incredible to see students, and the whole communication to them is always, hey, you're already on your phone, you're already playing video games. What if now you take a look at, and go through this training, and it's just, you see the light bulbs just going off, right? So it's possible, and I would love to be able to figure out how we can also integrate.
Yes, most certainly, CASA and identity both are involved.
Yes.
The challenge with coding, the old versions of coding, Java and others, if I can tell you, is like if I give you a dictionary and I'll ask you to read the dictionary and learn to write. And that's where we used to lose a lot of students. The curriculum that Apple has is much different and more
Yeah, no, I would love to connect with you on that, because again, they've been doing this nationally, and it's free, which is great, because they always just get sponsorship. So I love it when I hear it's free, so hope we can do that. Also, I think with MCPS, we did start with this whole school magnet middle school reform, and when you look at what they're doing, in Parkland Middle School, for example, it's just mind-boggling what students are able to do, and so that might be another thing for us to look at as we want to start earlier, to just see students so engaged in all these problem-solving and engineering and robotics, and just it blows your mind. And the beautiful thing about that is that, when we keep talking about equity, these are students who are, by and large, lower-income students or students who are first in their families to have an aspiration to go to college. Everybody's stepping up and everybody's doing the problem-solving. I think we may be onto something there in terms of working on these, all of these particular partnerships. And I would lastly say that you reminded me when you talk about the coding school that you guys are doing, a conversation that I had from this gentleman from India who was telling me that he was saying, that even here in Montgomery County, in this community, a lot of what they do is that they will send out software engineers, just, engineers, to go and be up to date with the latest that is happening in technology. They come back and then start training everybody else. And so it's a very sort of strategic and cost-effective way of keeping up with all the changes. We can replicate some of that, right? It goes into this notion of how flexible can you be with your curriculum. I think we need to be innovative in that way as well. How do we use continuing education at Montgomery College, or how do we readapt working in partnerships with what some of our businesses are already doing? There are so many different ways, and it's almost as if we all do need to take a step back and think more in a more innovative fashion versus always kind of following, the path of how we do education. It's happening. And lastly, I'll say that, my household is contributing to diversifying the tech field with my daughter, who graduates in May and already has a job with Microsoft in Seattle. So, when I went to visit her, I definitely, was kind of taken aback by the notion that, here's this young woman in an area that is, predominantly male and not as diverse, but there she is trying to make a difference as well. So. I know, tell me about it. My husband and I were saying that. I was like, maybe a couple of years and then she can transfer. And trust me, I'm not so thrilled about the fact that she's moving to Seattle, but I'm not going to tell her that, of course, not publicly anyway. Just kidding.
Maybe Amazon will bring enough tech jobs that she can
You know what? That
have
would
an
be so
opportunity to come
cool.
back for.
That would be cool. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Will?
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the conversation, everybody. This has been good. Thanks for staying. I know we're longer than we were going to be. A couple questions for the employers. So the essential skills, you talked about being very essential, right, into who you're hiring. Talked about the diversity. Let me ask you this, the role of upskilling in when you're looking for employment. So there's this debate now, macro debate, folks in Davos they're talking about how is automation going to impact the economy, and what are you going to do with all these middle-aged folks who were in jobs but no longer in jobs? Talk to me a little bit about, just from your experience, you don't have to answer that meta question, but from your experience and who you're looking, and I know you're not as employee dependent, but to the extent your previous business or your current businesses, that you're looking for the more traditional career pathway, student comes through, young person coming out, or someone who's re-entering and maybe looking to do something different because their career change or whatever. What do you see there, and you can project too? I'm just curious about your perspective.
Well, I think it's already been stated. Councilman Preenham mentioned that DAI especially, they're now looking for people that understand coding and maybe one language in coding. Maybe they focus on Python, but they're also good project managers, and they bring another skill set to it. And so in many generic companies that aren't coding or very coding oriented, they're going to need that dual qualification. And then there are the very specialized firms that need it. But and we've already said it a number of times, everyone will need some exposure to it.
I was just going to add, for those who are kind of shifting, AI really is dominating. So there are tools now. This is actually a little scary. It's both exciting and scary. There's a tool called Crystal Knows. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. But basically, it'll scrape. It connects to LinkedIn, and it'll scrape and look at kind of everything about you that it can find. And then for an employer like me, it'll literally tell me everything. Not what you tell me about yourself, but what it's found out about you. And employers are really using that information in their hiring decisions. So, it's not, again, just what you're taught in school and what you present to the employer, but it's now everything that's available outside. Digital. That is, yeah. So I think when it comes to
Warning us about.
Tell my kids.
Okay, I'll stop. But I just want to mention as an example. So, I say this with hesitance, but I got my master's from George Mason because I'm immigrant. But anyway, but the reason I say this is because back in 1998, there was a similar conversation happening across the river about the lack of IT, and particularly in terms of leadership, managers. And so a group of companies got together, and they founded the program that I got my master's in. And so I got my master's for free because I happened to work in that company. And it wasn't, there was an internal competition within the company. But I don't know if that is happening in our county. This is really a question to the higher ed.
I don't think it's happening. It may be beginning to happen, to try to build talent, but right now, a lot of those dollars that used to be invested have been pulled back.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. Did you, I know you were going to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on the idea of age diversity, if I just coin it slightly differently. It's the, for us, there's, people bring different aspects to the workforce that are incredibly valuable. Young people bring an eagerness to learn, and sometimes the ability to convert that eagerness with actually fast learning. They also bring a little bit of the distracted personality, where once they've learned something, they want to move to something else, and that's just part of life and learning. The slightly older group, they can bring tremendous stability to the workforce. They have a lot more experience in what's been a good place to work, what's maybe not been a great place to work, what's been a good job that they enjoyed, what they haven't. So the values that they bring to the workforce are sometimes more well-rounded. And so they could bring in some aspects of leadership that have a unifying effect on the diverse workforce that we have. So they're worth investing in, and they're extremely valuable in bringing in certain types of roles, right? It's not just about coding. You need business analysts, you need UI, people that understand user behavior, people that could talk to others and try to solve and put solutions together. So we have people that could be thorough, right? The testers, so we haven't had any issue across any of the ages. In fact, in some positions, we like having a mix because it has more of a stabilizing aspect to it, if that answers.
No, it's helpful. I just raise it because I think we have this dual thing. We're going to have to be dealing with both issues at the same time in earnest here as AI and automation continue to go. And I just want to make sure in these discussions we're thinking about that both. Dr. Rai?
I think jury's out on that, but if we have to learn anything from history, I know the conversation that was about automation.
I don't know if I agree with it, but it's a conversation.
Only one academic person involved in that whole Davos thing, and I spoke to him a little bit. When IT came, and we were growing up in India, and banks went on strike, that you can't put computers here because they will replace us, and we will have no jobs. And today, if you look back, ITs have created significantly more jobs. So this automation, that minor thing that we see right now, in the end, I believe it will create more jobs. But we do have to worry about affordability and accessibility. Yeah. The economic divide, digital divide, I think now is the skill divide. Right. We all know how to create cybersecurity program. We created working with VeriQ and others, and we offer a cyber advantage program for $600. Private providers will probably, actually they charge in this area $12,000.
Right.
If that $600 program is not available, if people who can pay $12,000 for a 6-month program, if they are the only ones who get these wonderful jobs that are out there, then see where we will be. So I think that is where the affordability, accessibility, I think we have to key in. The other thing I think that Councilmember Reamer mentioned, there is the place or time for now to think about a strategic plan for talent, tech talent, for the region. I think it's maybe a good idea to do that. Given the JP Morgan grant, employer signaling system and other things, it looks like we have all the pieces, and I think maybe the council can put those pieces together.
That's great. And I just one other quick question for Dr. Edelstein. You mentioned 90% of the people who graduate from USG stay in Montgomery County.
In the region.
In the region, not in Montgomery County. Okay, that would be too good to be true, I guess. But in the region, in their industry that they went to school. How long is that true? How long are you tracking that? It's more of a data point. Is that 1 year?
We have is probably about 3.5 years old. We haven't renewed it.
Okay.
So it's some anecdotal, but we did a survey about 3.5 years ago, and that gave us about the percentage. The university system in general is about 87% across the state. we're a little bit higher and we're regional.
This was a survey based on self-reporting? Yes. Okay, we should talk more about that, because I'm always interested on it. I know it's hard to do, but once people
It's
go.
extremely hard to track people over a period of time.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Terrific. Well, this has been a very good discussion. Oh, sorry, Andrew, you're up.
Yeah, well, I mean, the interesting thing with that, I mean, I think the number's really high no matter what, but the easiest people to reach are the people who are closer, so it probably skews a little bit higher than maybe what it is, but it's still a huge number and shows how important it is to invest in higher ed. I think, speaking of the automation question that Councilmember Jawando brought up, I mean, my view is, creativity breeds ingenuity and or desperation breeds creativity and ingenuity. And as the economy changes, your businesses change. And that's where, a lot of entrepreneurship comes from. That's where a lot of the, all the statistics showing the number of businesses that are started by immigrants and children of immigrants, I think, comes from you. When opportunities don't present themselves, folks create their own opportunities and get really creative and think differently and bring their unique perspective to issues, and you all are examples of that. And I think individually that happens for businesses, and we have to do a better job of collectively doing that, because I think we don't do as good a job in terms of the, as I was saying before, the sum of our parts, of thinking in terms of, as individual changes happen, that societal desperation requires major changes. What are we doing collectively to do what individual institutions and individual businesses are doing on a regular basis? And I think that's why this conversation is so important. And just to the reason where that question came from, this question of the age of the workforce and how do we change it. I mean, I think this is all part as well of when we talk about, used to be K through 12 and then early childhood, it's not to career, in my view, it's through career. And early childhood through career education means that, you're no longer get into an industry and in a particular job and stay in that job forever and have certain protections, and that job carries wage increases and benefits, and you may move slightly up the ladder within that career path, unfortunately, for better and for worse. And I think sometimes it's for better and sometimes it's for worse, but that's less of what we see now, and more you're in a job for 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, and then you have to find a new job. And the new job could be in a related area, but it might be different from the job that you're leaving. And so creating this pipeline, as we're talking about here, and opportunities to retrain folks who are in the workforce, not just students who haven't entered the workforce or who are taking breaks from their education to put themselves through school, et cetera. I think we increasingly have to think about this as a lifelong journey in terms of our career education, and having WorkSource Montgomery and having the college and having USG and having businesses partner, and eliminating some of these silos where the businesses who do have their heads down, understandably, trying to worry about a P&L and worry about their competitors, that we're also, we're helping to convene and to collaborate. I think that's, really what you're hearing from all of us, is that we're all interested in doing that, and hopefully we can, with MCDC, with WorkSource Montgomery, with the college, with USG, and with our private sector partners, figuring out ways that we can do better here. And I think that this is a good start. I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation to figure out how we figure out where to go together, and how to take advantage of the obvious assets that we have and the amazing things that are happening in the county, both on the private and the public side, and eliminate those barriers. And I love the line of a wall on its side. How do we knock the walls down, put it on its side, and then walk across the bridges together? And so I really appreciated that, and appreciate the conversation. Look forward to a prolonged discussion of next steps and how we can be productive partners together.
Super. Well, I think today's discussion sets the table for really several years worth of work. It's not going to take us that long to get to next steps and so on, but this is a topic of great interest to many council members. I think we want to do a lot here. I think we all feel the urgency and the opportunity and the need to really make bigger, bolder moves and develop programs that really address the need. We heard a terrific presentation about the MCPS program and the need to complement that, and make it a whole county program. And we've talked a lot about what some of those components could be. So we will consider next steps and then be in touch. We really appreciate everyone's participation today. Thank you so much. This is really an exciting area for us to do some work together in. So thanks for being here today, and talk to you soon.